2611 was followed by a frantic scramble within all the intelligence agencies. First to find out inside what went wrong, and then to shift blame on other intelligence agencies or wings of government for not having been able to foresee or to prevent this. One result of this was that a flood of information poured into the newspapers and magazines in the first week. And the information did show, as I think all of you know, that the entire tragedy could have been averted. The Intelligence Bureau first got wind that the Lashkar-e-Taiba was developing a sea route to India via Mumbai as far back as in March 2007.
Terrorism is indeed a grave menace that it has, as you pointed out, acquired global proportions, that there is no sanction for terrorism in any religion whatsoever, and that there is no historical or contemporary justification for any act of terror in a civilized society. Of course, there is a complete and total distortion of the Islamic message, and this distortion has obviously acquired serious proportions, and we do talk about this all the time, but the fact of the matter is that these distortions continue to stay. Despite its universalistic and humanistic components, there is this acute demonization of Muslims, a demonization which is offensive, which creates anger, which creates discontent across the world. The usefulness of the interfaith dialogues would be apparent if it were to be conducted on a large scale in an organized manner.
Globally, the wave of jihadi terrorism is believed to have begun around 1979, and largely with the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. There is another perspective that believes that radical Sunni variety of jihadi terrorism emerged only in the 1990s after the end of the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. But without direct contact, there were similarities between the jihadi groups of the West and that in the South Asian context. They were both formed from affiliates of venerable, non-violent, radical Islamic organizations, and the Hamas from the Islamic Brotherhood and the Taliban from the Jamaat-e-Ulema-Islam in Pakistan, both developed into extremely effective militias using violence. The first thing is, yes, terrorists don't respect human rights, but that's the problem, that's the whole problem of the modern conflict scenario, low-intensity conflicts, as it is commonly referred to in military terminology. Because in low-intensity conflicts, the enemy is not defined, the time frame is not defined, the objectives are not defined, and these are often long drawn-out battles of attrition, where the rules of engagement are not adhered to. They tell me where in history has terrorism or insurgency been curtailed by complete respect to human rights? I don't know of an example. That's one. The second aspect is, as far as the Indian state is concerned, respect for human rights is enshrined in the Constitution of India.
एक सेक्शन ऐसा खड़ा हो गया है, मुसलमानों की बात बताता हूं मैं आपको, एक सेक्शन ऐसा खड़ा हो गया है, चाहे छोटा ही थोड़ा ही हो, जिसका ख्याल ये है कि जिन चीज़ों में लोगों की आइडेंटिटी है और वो अपनी आइडेंटिटी को पकड़ने की जहां कोशिश कर रहे हैं, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि वो एक्सट्रीमिज्म की तरफ जा रहे हैं। एक तरफ इनको भड़काया जा रहा है और उकसाया जा रहा है, अंदर से कोशिश की जा रही है, और दूसरी तरफ उनको डराया और धमकाया जा रहा है। ये दोनों काम बंद होने चाहिए, और इसको हमारी इंडियन सिविल सोसाइटी को इसके ऊपर सोचना चाहिए और खड़ा होना चाहिए, लड़ना चाहिए, और इस सिचुएशन से इस कम्युनिटी को बाहर निकालना चाहिए। इसको होपलेस नहीं होने देना चाहिए, ना होने देंगे हम।
terrorism is not a very recent issue. If we see the history, all the massacres, all the crusades, all the genocide which has happened, in somewhere or the other, it's an act of terrorism. We need to spiritualize the politics, we need to secularize the religion, we need to socialize the business.
Who want to impose their ideology or beliefs or even dogmas upon others. They want to bring about a change in the system, in the structures, whether they're social structures, organizational structures. One of the objectives could be to bring about a change in the way of life and imposing another way of life. How do they get what they want? Mostly through intimidation. That's the basis of terrorism. Terrorism is a tactic, it's a method, it's not an end. Intimidation, coercion, ruthless retribution or punishment. Again, it's all part of the same process of intimidation. They are also known as non-state actors. What does it really mean? It means there's no allegiance. There's no respect for borders. There is no respect for local laws, local customs, norms, international conventions. Call it what you will. These are typical characteristics.
Now, if you look at this map, it shows the polarization and the conflict as drawn out by someone. This is not my architecture. In every little blob, it says Christianity versus Islam, Hinduism versus Islam, so-and-so versus Islam. Now, this polarization and this divide across the globe is something that needs to be bridged, and it is a threat to our national fabric too, and therefore we need to be all the more sensitive to it. Now, the fact remains that we as a nation need to identify that we are on a slow burn. There is aggression, not only externally, but they've infiltrated inside. And they've infiltrated inside because we've left doors and windows open for them to exploit.